Good morning.
Morning.
So,
How are you today? So did you stay late yesterday or did you get some rest
yeah,
after your trip?
I actually went home and just fell asleep right away. So,
That was probably good a decision.
yeah, it was a hard day, and even after the big trip from London to Vienna, it was nice to get some rest. And you? Did you have a nice evening?
Yeah, we actually returned a bit early. Yeah, but I actually woke up pretty early today as well, and feels good. So yeah, finally can relax because my talk was yesterday, and now I can just enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yes, and how did you like the conference so far?
Yeah, so far it's a very nice event, I must say. But yeah, to be honest, I was a bit stressed out about my talk, and I couldn't really focus on the speeches. So I just reviewed my slides, and yeah. So
Yeah, that's kind of
today will be the conference for me. Like,
Okay.
Yeah, there's a bunch of talks that I'm looking forward to.
Which one do you look forward to most?
Yeah, so definitely the one about microservices, I believe, is an akka and play, because
Okay.
this is the stuff. So I recently started a new job, and I've moved to Scala, which I like very much so far. And yeah, I would like to learn more about all the frameworks and the whole ecosystem that comes with it.
Yeah, actually, I have a few colleagues who work in Scala, and they like Akka as well. They actually moved to Scala because of Akka, so that's an interesting
And
topic.
the last talk, it's all about morphisms, I believe. Yeah, that's the title. It's about the category theory.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like it should be a good primer for functional languages.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to get quite an extensive knowledge during my studies about functional programming and like a theoretical foundations of it. But yeah, it will be probably a good refresher because it's been a while.
Yeah, I guess so. So your talk yesterday, I really liked it.
Thank you.
And you were talking about why sitting is considered deadly, which is quite ironic given the fact that we are sitting in a car.
That is true. Yeah.
So Sam, by inviting you to this show, I actually contribute to your death in some way.
Yeah, that is true. Like, but the sitting in a car or on a tram or on a bus while commuting to work, it's like an example of all the technological and advancements and things that civilization inventions that cater to our lazy human nature, and we don't really think about it on a daily basis, but it wasn't always like this. Like for the most of the human history, like we didn't have any of these. So and like our bodies evolved to move and not to sit all day.
Actually, but it evolved to run mostly because we were hunter-gatherers. The men were hunting, and they had to run and chase animals for days even.
Yeah, that's true. It's actually like a combination of both running and walking. It was like an endurance test, so that you can endure more than the prey that you're stalking. So it was like a alternating between like walking, tracking, and then running after the prey. Yeah, it was all about endurance.
Yeah, and so your point, I think, was that we should start somehow making sure that we don't always sit, right? So, and you showed one chart which I found extremely interesting, is that if your job is to stand all day long, that's not that good either. You actually have to sit some of the time. And I think the optimum was about a quarter of the time sitting and then the rest standing.
Yeah, so it's not like exact science probably at this point. There is a lot of more and more evidence that prolonged sitting is bad for you. But standing all the time, it's also not a solution. Like it's as with almost everything, it's not a silver bullet. It's all about like being still and not moving in a single position, because your body is great when it comes to adapting to whatever you're doing on a daily basis. And so that's why there are some like when you're sitting, well, actually some of your muscles, the postural muscles, are turned off because they don't have to stabilize your spine because your back is supported. So these muscles deteriorate. But there are also some shortening, adaptive shortening of the muscles, like for example the ones that bend your legs, right, like in the hips, and that actually causes you to move differently. These adaptations then cause your movement to not be like proper or correct or healthy in a healthy way. This transfers to your other movement patterns, which years after years can lead to different dysfunctions, because like for example some of your muscles in your body are taking over responsibilities of other muscles that should actually do the actual movement, but these muscles weren't designed to make this move, and so it can be sustained for a while, but it will give up eventually. And this leads to different pain basically. I think that we can agree that most of us live in some sort of like musculoskeletal disorder, some kind of a pain, and a lot of it can actually be traced back to prolonged sitting.
Yeah, and actually you even had a list of diseases that can be linked to prolonged sitting, and some of them were the kinds of problems that we associate with modern life, like obesity was one of them, which I'm completely at fault. So I actually have a weight problem, and yeah, that's kind of obvious that if you sit and don't move, then you're gonna get obese. So on one hand it is like common sense, but there are some physiological things happening within your body when you sit down, that, like for example stress hormone is being released. Like our sitting position causes our diaphragm not to work correctly, so we have like shortness of breath, which also adds to the fact that the body and the organism associates like quick short breathing with stressful situations. Okay. But also there are physiological things like I believe it is like a lipase enzyme, which is, well, actually I don't want to lie here because I don't remember exactly, but some physiological changes on the enzyme levels that actually make you gain fat even more. Like not just the fact that you are not moving. And so I believe that Dr. Levine, who wrote a book, Get Up, that I talk about in my talk. So he actually was also at some point obese, even though he's been studying and researching topics like obesity and negative effects of sedentary behaviors. And yeah, one of the things that he found out is that he was looking for ways to burn more calories during the day, and so he actually did these experiments with treadmill desks. Okay.
So, so not just a standing desk, but a treadmill desk when you walk at a slow pace, just to burn more calories throughout the day.
And is it possible to work while you're walking? Because I do work standing up sometimes, but it feels kind of hard to imagine to work while I'm walking on a treadmill.
Yeah, I haven't tried it myself. It is supposed to be a very slow pace. It's not like ordinary walking.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about the treadmill desk, but there were some studies about the productivity gains or performance loss due to working while standing, for example. And for tasks like, even for tasks like touch typing, there wasn't any significant performance loss, for example. But for tasks like graphical manipulation and graphic design, there was actually some performance loss. But I guess for keyboard typing, there shouldn't be any problems. I'm not sure about those treadmill desks, and I can't recall any studies about the performance loss due to walking.
Okay. And what would you say to all the developers around the world who are sitting next to their desks in their offices?
So I would say stop for a while and think about it, because I think one of the biggest problem is that we're not thinking about this. We're on a sort of an autopilot, and I think the awareness should be the first thing that we get. So I can't recommend highly enough this book that was published in 2016, The Deskbound. It was a true eye-opener for me, and I would recommend you to check it out. And with that comes like awareness, or having this external information, some pointers to research studies. So on an intellectual level, you can be convinced that this is actually a problem. But then the second step would be to actually realize limitations of your own body. So the second step would be the awareness of your body, and and the limitations of it. So there are some. So actually, when I started reading about all this, I could say I started a journey. So I started practicing yoga, which actually lets you feel your body. And actually, when you see how other people, how flexible they are and how easy they can do different positions, you can see how limited you are. And over the years, how many compensations were created in your body, which is not normal. It's not healthy, and will just get worse if we don't do anything about it. And and the long story short, I really believe that the first step towards this right direction is to the simplest thing that we can do at work is to start working in a standing position on a regular basis.
But not everyone gets a standing desk at their work.
Yes, that's true. And also, just to clarify, it's not, as we said, it's not a silver bullet, and so you shouldn't be striving for standing all the time. You should be alternating the position. So, but if your employer doesn't provide such equipment, which
they should,
yeah. Which is a totally different topic. Also, making the employer aware of the problem, and they can actually gain something here. So I would say, but I was in a similar situation when I changed jobs and went to a new office. There weren't any such desks, but I noticed, that a couple of colleagues in another room were actually working in a standing position. And what they did is, just a simple yet brilliant solution. They just came up with this do-it-yourself solution for a sit-stand workstation, which is just a simple IKEA table with a shelf attached for the keyboard, and that's it. You put it on the desk. You have like 2 monitors, 2 keyboards, and you can just easily alternate between the two positions.
That sounds like a cheap solution if you couldn't get your employer to buy.
And it's very, very cheap. When it comes to the actual cost, and also to, it's very easy to build it. So if you just want to try it out, see if it's for you, that's the easiest way. Because nowadays there are like commercial solutions which are somewhere between this very cheap and like a proper electrical programmable height adjustable desk, which are these sit-stand workstations, which are also just these add-ons that you put on your desk, and you can just easily alternate, put it up and down.
And actually, I think so. I do have an automatically adjustable table from IKEA, which is really interesting because most of these desks are really expensive.
So
and
you
the
have
one,
the electrical one.
Electrical one, both at work and at home, and it turns out that by far the cheapest such motorized desk is from IKEA. So.
Yeah, which is still quite expensive. I believe the last time I checked it was 2,400 zlotys, which would be like $600 US dollars or something like
it's
that.
It's not cheap. It's like 3 or 4 times more expensive than a regular desk, right? So you gotta invest into it. But once you did, you use it for years and years and years, and it saves your house. And coming to that. What I was thinking is that maybe those people who smoke, giving up smoking saves you the money for buying a standing desk.
Yeah.
But that also begs the question: if someone is smoking and sitting at their work, which one should they quit first? Which one is the more dangerous?
That's a interesting question. So in the talk I actually compared the two because the author of the Get Up book compares sitting to smoking. He says that like sitting is the new smoking, and like he actually argues that it might be even worse or more harmful than smoking. But I would say, well, I was also a smoker for a lot of years. I tried quitting a couple of times. Right now it's almost a year since I smoked my last cigarette, so fingers crossed.
Congratulations.
The last one, thank you. It's a very tough question. I can't give you the answer that this one is worse than this, but I would say smoking is a really terrible thing to do. So it's like when I was realizing that I have to change something about my life, I knew that smoking is actually the very first thing that I should do, and it's like the most beneficial one.
But what I found really interesting, and that was something I was trying to get at, is that you had these numbers, how many years you can lose by smoking and by sitting, and for smoking, you said that on an average 7 years of your life you can lose to constantly smoking, and constantly sitting was 15 years, which is much more. So that was somewhat surprising for me.
Yeah, so to add to that, so you're right. So in the year 2000 or so, researchers wanted to illustrate to the public how dangerous smoking is, and they calculated that you lose 11 minutes of your life for smoking one cigarette. On average, of course, because there are a lot of assumptions that they made in the original paper. But over the lifespan, it might mean like 7 years lost. And Dr. Levine, in his book, says that 1 hour of sitting might cost you 2 hours of your life. And the next part, this 15 years, is actually, these are my calculations with my own assumptions, which is a really rough estimate, right? I had to make some assumptions as to at what age we start our careers, how much time we spend sitting, when do we retire. So it's a pretty rough estimate, but I think there's the same order of magnitude, I would say, as with smoking.
All right.
Yeah, and actually I go back to this original number, when I talk about the Blue Zones project and the longevity and places on Earth where people actually, live longer than the general population, and what are the things that they're doing on a daily basis, why that is the case, that they get to live longer. And there are a couple of contributing factors. I believe the researchers identified 9 traits, but one of them, very important, is this like natural movement, it's physical activity, but in a sense, not in a our sense of the word, or like it doesn't mean we have to do regular exercises on the gym or something. Like it's these people have movements woven into their daily lives.
Yeah.
It's just how they
And
live.
it's much easier to move a lot if your daily life is like that. You have something that you do that makes you move to begin with.
Yeah,
Because
and-
I mean, just exercising for an hour a day doesn't get you there, does it?
Yeah, but according to the studies, it's not enough. And by no means, I always forget to mention that during my talk, that by no means I'm saying that you should stop exercising if you do that. It's very good for you. But what they're saying is that it's just not enough to negate all those effects.
And also, in Hungary, there is a rule that you have to stop working for 10 minutes every hour. And they don't enforce it, but there is this recommendation.
Yeah,
that
we have something similar. Yeah, it's like regulated by law that you are entitled to 5 minutes break every hour if you spend more than 4 hours in front of the computer.
Yeah.
But yeah, for a programmer, for a developer, it's especially for a passionate programmer, I believe it's very common to spend 2-3 hours at a time working on a challenging problem, forgetting about everything that's happening and just
being in the flow,
not realizing what you're doing to your body day to day. And I know I was doing the very same thing. It's just that I think that now my eyes are open and I see those things and I get this awareness. I'm conscious of my body and its limitations. That I believe it set me on
the right path.
Right path, exactly. And I would also mention that it probably wouldn't happen if not for my dad.
Okay.
Because so he's been dealing with a lot of problems, especially with his spine.
Okay.
So he had multiple surgeries, but when he was healthy, he was very physically active, and he was aware of all those things, almost all of those things that I'm reading about. He already knew that 20 years ago, and he always tried to teach me this. He was telling me about this, but I just didn't listen. When you are young, you're not thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And he actually, when I talked to him recently, he mentioned that he was very aware of that, that he's talking to me, but I'm, not listening or not applying. But he kept talking anyway, because he believed that at some point, I would just, let's call it, quote unquote, grow up, and all of this comes back to me at the right time. And
it did.
And it did. And I believe it would take much longer if it weren't for him, and I'm very grateful for that.
All right. Well, thank you for this wonderful discussion. I'm really glad that we talk about this, and probably I'm gonna stand up a bit more from now on.
Awesome.
At least I have my gear for that. So, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode. I hope it earned your subscription. But while you're here, let me show you something. The people behind me are playing a game called Lean Poker. It's a fun and exciting way to learn how you can deliver value much faster than you have ever imagined. It's exciting. The link is in the description. Check it out if you want to support this channel.